So this is Camp Creator.
Welcome back to another behind-the-scenes interview about the making of Camp Creator. Here I'm joined by co-writer Alexander Lathem, who helped us craft the story for Camp Creator. Alex, could you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you contributed to the project?
Yeah, well, I'm just sort of like an average Joe. I'm your normal guy. I've worked with Joe before on a variety of projects for, nearly 10 years now, I'd say. A decade's worth of Joe collaboration under my belts. I do some writing. I like to write. You can see some of my written work on Joe's channel. I contributed in Camp Creator, not really through writing any particular scenes, but just kind of offering my own advice on the process and working through the project as we did read-throughs, as we did various drafts, helping come up with some aspects of the aesthetics too. We talked about that on a few things, on a few meetings. So yeah.
I think where you were the most involved was as we were workshopping the story for a couple of months in the summer and fall of 2024. There was a lot of conversations answering, okay, well, where do we go next? Right? How do we develop some of what's there further?
I mean, there was definitely a lot of discussion of like you had the general outline and the idea, obviously, but yeah, it was kind of like scene by scene, like what happens, yeah, like you said, what happens next, and like what is the driving force? Because like Melody, obviously, like we I think I helped decide like how does she get into Camp Creator, right? And then even like the conflict with Walt as well. I played a role in that kind of story decision, and it was really fun. It was really like I think because admittedly when you first came to me with Camp Creator, I think I was just sort of like, is this in my wheelhouse? Can I contribute? And I was very nervous about kind of, because I was like, I don't want to take this cart and ride it off into the sunset and get it off track. I really wanted this to be, I was like, Joe has a vision here, but it was really nice to, like I said, be able to help with those, like some critical story decisions.
Well, I appreciated it. I mean, Camp Creator really is like, it probably is the first like feature length project I've written and put out there. And so to me, it was still daunting at the time, kind of just figuring out as a writer, well, all right, I'm trying to make a whole show.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not, how do I put it? It's not that I'm struggling to fill time, but it's that like, okay, using this time to the best of my ability. Because I could have kept adding scenes and kept writing. So one of our big conversations at the time was like, well, okay, it's like, well, we could keep doing this, and this, and this, and follow these threads. But we also, it's like, all right, if we're being picky about what scenes to include, then how do we develop the story with that limitation? Because if you're used to writing short films, doing a feature length thing can feel daunting and it feels like you have so much time. But for me, the reality was, oh, well, how do I limit what I can do to just a 90-minute to 2-hour story?
Even though we have more pages, perhaps than anything else we've worked on, like barring like one or two exceptions, I did feel constricted. I was like, we have to be very careful about like what, I remember us having a conversation where I was like, well, I really would like to introduce this new character, but actually like so-and-so should fill that role. Right. And I think there's even still stuff in the final product where I'm like, oh man, like if I had another like 15, 20 pages, like we could do this with this character. And so it is kind of funny, as much as we had like more runway, so to speak, it was still kind of like we still had to be very careful. We still had to be very careful. And I think it's interesting.
Something we talked about was Melody and her entrance to the camp. And I know something we talked about kind of early on was like class, right? And how it's like, well, let's use Camp Creator as kind of a microcosm of different artists who are coming from different backgrounds, who have access to different resources. And it's like, well, fundamentally, this is a story about, well, getting access to those resources. And so it's like class is kind of a fundamental aspect of the story. And not that it's explored incredibly sophisticatedly, but it is core and central to the conflict and how we compare other characters based on their privilege and the opportunities that they've had.
And maybe you would figure this out too, but I think Walt being from this wealthier background and being this conflicting force in Melody's time at the camp, I wanted that to be at the forefront because I think it's relatable. And I think it's true. I think it's true to our real world, and it's something that, like, I think we've all probably experienced.
What are ways in which you feel like your personal experience relates to the story of Camp Creator?
I remember being younger and kind of interacting with, like people of all class backgrounds. I knew kids who were poorer than me. I knew kids who were way wealthier than, you know, their family was than mine. And yeah, those were experiences I think that kind of stick with you, because you kind of see how they have to live. And that I think played a role in like Walt, where he's very flippant, he's like, whatever, man, like my dad's a rich music producer, and like this camp doesn't mean doesn't mean much to him, compared to Melody, where it's like, well, this is everything. And that was, like I said, stuff like that.
If there's a sin of pride that overtakes me, it's a belief that as an artist, if I can just like, well, say something about this and get it out there, that is productive in any way. But also sometimes you got to believe that that what you do matters in some way. And I think it's I've really enjoyed, I guess, like us being able to confront some of these issues and use storytelling as a way of getting other people to think about it, hopefully in a new way at the very least.
Yeah, I know something we talked about a lot was like kind of who the target audience is, and we kind of were like, well, this is probably something that like a lot of high school productions, could not only could put on, but would want to put on. I remember reading it when we were doing read-throughs. I remember thinking, I did a little bit of theater in high school, and I was like, I would have liked to have performed this. There's roles I could have been like, man, I would have wanted to play Walt, right? Like I would have wanted to play a role like that.
It's limiting too, because I guess there's always things where it's like, well, all right, if it's for a younger teenage audience, like how much do we get into this? How, specific, or I guess just like this is a story that like I think is resonant to adults as well, and encountering different hardships and a lot of my experience with kind of different creative issues or things I related to as a kid and also as an adult, living in Nashville, working with other creatives, who are older too. So there's things that I think anyone experiences, but also because it is teenage focused, that also means that's like, well, it's brought down to a little more simple, archetypal. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Like I think I've heard a lot of people have resonated with Melody. And of course I relate a lot to her having written her. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that there's something that people can kind of relate to.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I think it is, like you said, there's something kind of universal about it, where it's like, yeah, you can be an adult and enjoy it. And I think just like, if, and I guess this thing about like writing is like, I think if you write something like true and real, and like, as we talked about with like it being a story about, it's a story about following your dreams and passions and kind of asking yourself, like, do I have these variety of skill sets? And do I have them in enough of a quality that I can produce something of quality? Am I, when there's money on the line, as it is with Melody, where there's like, this is like a chance. This is kind of like will I get this opportunity again? I mean, these are things that, like I said, are true to real life. And I think if you do that in your art and you stick to a truth, like it's going to resonate and stay in the conscious of a lot of people.
After the script was being done, before we had like the official like live stage reading at the Homewood Theater, we still worked together to record our own little digital read through to be able to just give a feeling of how the story felt, what the pacing was like. And for me, that was very important, with just being able to kind of just hear the story happen in time, how it would actually play out live. And I guess I'd love to kind of ask, like, do you remember doing that first kind of read through over the phone, and what did you think then?
I do. I mean, that was, I think, to me, the thing about art, at least for me, when I'm making something, is it can take a while for it to kind of come together. And I've kind of talked about it before. It's like, and as like speaking both metaphorically and literally, like when I'm painting, there's a lot of times where I'm like, all I'm seeing are just random brush strokes. But eventually, like I can step back and it's like, I see what I've been painting. I see the sum of the parts. And that was a moment where I think I was 100% like, I was like, I believe in this. Not that I didn't believe before, folks, but I was like, no, I was like, I see the vision now. I can see that. And I'm almost like, this can be something that I think is like really quite phenomenal. And so I had a lot of fun recording that, because I think it's as anything, like a play or a musical. I mean, it's meant to be seen, right? It's meant to be, you can read the script, but it's great to take part in it, either to watch a performance or perform it yourself. And so I do have like a really fond memory of, like, it was a long session, obviously, But I remember like, and I think I was doing like various character voices, and I think I was starting to kind of lose my voice a little bit. But I really enjoyed that, and that to me was when it was like we had taken the next step. Like I was like, I stepped back and I saw what I was painting, so to speak, what we were painting, what Joe was painting, and I said, awesome. And now on to the finishing touches. Writing is just so tough because I think, and I've had this thought before, where I would sometimes think, well, writing must be like the easiest art form because we all can write, we all learn how to write, and it's something that you can do by yourself. It's like it doesn't have to necessarily be a collaborative thing. But like you said, it's just like when you get in those weeds and you kind of are doing scene by scene, I think you can get so lost, and you're just like, well, is this all connecting, or is this kind of like the ravings of a madman? Does this just look like some crazy manifesto or does this resonate? Because I think the best part about any form of art, but especially like anything that involves like writing in the process, is it feels like it feels poetic. It feels like a beautiful flow, and that applies to like a book or a movie or a play or musical or whatever, where you have to be very conscious of certain decisions. And you have to think about, especially with like musicals and plays, is there's that context of like, well, it's going to be performed on stage in a variety of settings. Can you make something that is going to always resonate, that is always going to hit? And you almost, like, it's something we talked about was like with production, it's like we almost had to kind of just in the back of our mind say, it's like, well, we're aware that not everyone is going to have a master prop designer and is going to have access to the craziest sets, and so it's like it really comes down to these character moments and these themes.
I agree, which is why it was so encouraging to do our read through and then later the stage reading, just to go like, okay, like I can get transported into the story even without a crazy set. In the script, I think like I tried to balance like gesturing to the potential for like, okay, a set designer could like go crazy with here's the interiors and exteriors of camp creator. There's a lot of different moments where a character is on screen in a story, either because they're editing footage or watching back a short film. And I'm like, well, this is in the context of the story. They're on a screen. Like in a play, that could just be one half of the stage. In a higher grade production, they could actually use projections and stuff. And like, I think there's opportunities to scale up, scale down, as any play does. But I think it still works at different scales. And that's definitely something that I kept in mind, is like, I want this to be attractive, that if someone wanted to put in the work, it's all there in the script. But even if you just have a black box theater, you can still do something with the story. And I think that's true with most stories. Like, I think the audience is, especially for theater, is so willing to immerse themselves and suspend their disbelief. I think there's a lot of freedom with what you can do on stage, with being able to achieve crazy ideas while only gesturing to them.
And then also, I mean, this is kind of, it's still on topic, but like music can be very universal, where it can be, even though obviously there's lyrics to these songs, I think just like when we talk about just something as simple as like a texture change, or an additional instrument comes in or an instrument leaves, like, and that can just say so much, and that like is something you can say even without words. And then when you accompany it with lyrics, I mean, it elevates it in such a way, and that's like what I think is so cool about like music. And maybe this isn't completely comparable, but it's like I think about like early silent films that didn't have any dialogue, like really experimental stuff, where it was just sort of like, can we tell a universal experience that you could watch anywhere in the world and get that same kind of emotion, that same idea? Could it come across no matter where and who is watching it or listening? Because I will say, coming clean, is that I didn't really have a hand in any of the music that was made. I mean, that was really all Joe and anyone else he might have partnered with, and that was something that was like. And that was, I guess, another struggle with when we worked on this, is I felt, I was kind of like, well, I was like, I can kind of lend my hand to, like, I can kind of help talk about how we can make the story come to life. But obviously it's a musical, and so much of that is going to be done through music. And that was something where I was like, I just don't have the skill set. And every time you would share something with me, and I maybe I didn't always like say it, but I remember always being just very impressed with like, oh wow, like that, this feels it feels professional. And like you talk about, like, just every character's song feels really unique, just because of, like you said, just being willing to say, like, well, let's give them each an instrument group and be very conscious, and not just do that for fun, but to say, well, no, this actually can can help characterize them. This can help you tell you something about them. And so I want to once again just kind of like, you know, give Joe his flowers, because I think that's difficult, and that's something that's like, I don't know, that's an artistic skill set that I just don't possess. And so that's I think that speaks volumes to, I think, the complexity of a musical, because it's not just a script, you know, and even a script is not a small thing, which is I guess what I was trying to gesture to earlier, which is that like writing, even if it can seem simple, it's just like, oh yeah, sit down and tap the keyboard, like that is still very complex. And then you're bringing in a whole new genre of art, a whole new medium, and melding that, and that takes skill. So I mean, like I said, I just want to give Joe his flowers.
Well, I appreciate that, but enough about me. I want to talk about you, and I guess I want to talk a little bit more about like, all right, like, well, as a writer, I guess I want to get into like, well, what interests you about the craft, and what do you do in other projects as well? Like, what do you think you bring to writing? Because you mentioned that, like, yeah, like a script is not as simple as just, you know, typing out the letters. So what all goes into storytelling for you, and what are you excited about? Other things that you have put out there and things you are working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I guess there's a lot there, and I'll try to answer everything. Let me know if I missed something. But to me, like art, like the point of art is that it is, I mean, it's an experience. I mean, it's something, it is uniquely human, and it is something that, I guess, in terms of like, as the viewer, as the person who is taking in the experience, as a member of the audience, so to speak, it is all about, for me, connecting with someone else, whether that's the artist themselves or with other people, right? And kind of like, whether it, like, I think poetry is something that, you know, that I like, because it is like, it is about expressing an emotion. It is about kind of saying like, this is how I'm feeling, this is my thoughts, you know, and I need someone else to understand me. And that's why I like poetry, because it's like, well, then I know that I'm not the only one who feels that way. There's that connection. And I feel like that's true of all art forms, whether it is music or a book or a movie or what have you. And that interests me, like I said, as someone who is partaking in it. But as a creator, it's kind of the same thing, where it's like, well, now I want to express myself. I have something to say. I have this idea that I want to communicate. That it's like, I mean, kind of like you were talking about earlier, it's like, you know, maybe it's a bit of it may seem silly to some, but it's like, you want to kind of change the world. You want to be that turning point for someone. You want to be their guide, because I that's how it's been for me. I think we all have probably had a piece of art that's really touched our soul and made us, and been like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way, or like, no, this clarifies something for me. And so, I mean, I guess just like in my own work, and I'm trying to think of like, what is a good example of something that maybe we've worked on. I mean, it's tough. I think about Punctuation Pals. You know, that was something where like, I didn't really have a lot to say, actually, like in that one, which kind of contradicts my earlier point. But I wanted to make something. I wanted to make something funny, you know, and that was a comedy show that we did, and that was a little more lighthearted. But I think I was still trying to say something, because I think that at the time I wrote that, I was just sort of not happy with a lot of like animated shows, a lot of, you know. I mean, it's like, I can watch the Family Guy funny moments clips until the cows come home, but I was like, I feel like there's just something I have to offer, and I think that was what drove me to do that. Like, even something as kind of banal as that, just came from a place of like, well, no, I have something unique to say. I think I have a uniquely funny perspective I can share.
And I know with Camp Creator, there's so much I wanted to pack into not just the main story, but like some of the side conversations where it's like, well, all right, well, the characters are talking about like, well, what does it mean to be a true artist, right? And what does it mean for someone to have something to express? And that's different from someone who's just, you know, kind of, I guess, following the shadow of what they think it means to be an artist. And those are different things. You can imitate what you think a great artist is, which is different from having that feeling of, oh, no, I have something to communicate, and now I'm an artist because I'm expressing something. And the different characters of Camp Creator are going through that as well. And so that's something I want the audience to think about, is where are you in that process of finding your voice? For some people, it's easy. For Melody, it's just natural, right? But some of these other characters have to kind of sift through that. Walt has to kind of turn off all of that commercialism, commodification type philosophy, and he has to just suppress that in order to go, oh no, let me just get to what the art's about.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think, to me, it's like I've always felt like I was a creative person, but I do think that is a skill. It is still a skill. I think it's something that, like, maybe some people, I think like any skill, some people take to it easier than others, but it is one that you still develop, right? And I think you develop that in a lot of different ways. I mean, I think you develop it by doing, by trying things, and kind of being able to like make art, like especially if you're writing something and then kind of saying like, okay, well, like I tried this, like, did that work? And I know for me, it's like I feel like I feel like I'm happy that I can kind of constantly look back and say like, oh, this is this thing I wrote that I was really proud of, and I still am. I now feel like I can do that better because I've been able to grow that creative skill, and not only the creative skill, but there's another skill that is using, like, turning that creativity into a finished product. Not to sound like Walt, but like a finished result is what I mean. Like you can be like, you can have all these ideas, and then it's like, well, it's like, okay, well, can I translate that to a compelling narrative? And what medium does that narrative take? Is it a short story? Is it a poem? Is it a musical? Something you said that I think is so critical to all this is like, it is about like, what do you have to say that has not been said before? And I guess that's the fascinating thing, is like, I feel like I have no shortage of ideas, and they're constantly evolving. And I guess like if I'm even offering advice, is to like, not be afraid to still make it.
It's always worth expressing yourself, I think, no matter how hard it is, or no matter all those other things that can get in the way. I think we're wrapping up the interview here. I guess I'd love to know, do you have any other closing thoughts on what you're excited about for the future of Camp Creator, what you're excited about for your own projects? What can people look forward to? And any other things you want to say about the writing process either?
It was really nice to do the interview, and I could talk about this for many hours. I mean, we could do if I had a podcast, let me tell you folks, like, pray I don't get a good mic, because I may never stop talking. Making art can be both very therapeutic and kind of stressful at the same time. It's one of those things where it's like, I feel this compulsion to do it. And I think just once again, maybe this is kind of random advice, but I think it is, like I said, it is so human. It is so good. And I think I think you should always try to put yourself out there and share with the world, because you never know who it'll resonate with. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen an artist online basically say, oh, I deleted all my stories, I deleted all my art because I just didn't feel like it was reaching an audience. And I was like, well, I never, regretfully, it's like, well, maybe I didn't really comment as much as I should have on this. But I was like, no, this actually was really me. Like, this is fundamental to me. And so I always recommend people share it, but I also don't want people to get scared about that. And I guess just like, it can be so good sometimes to just try to write a poem. And even if you don't share it, with anyone, or even if it doesn't get, go viral, like it can feel good, and it should feel good. And my advice to people is to just learn to love your process. And like I said, that's not to say there won't be stressful moments, but like, learn to love what you're doing. And I really, like, I think if you do want to make it big for whatever, in the art form, I beg of you not to chase trends or do that, because there's so many people doing that already. There's no shortage of that. And I'm not saying that you can't be successful that way, but you will find a very loyal and loving audience if like we said coming near the beginning, like, if you speak something that's true and you speak it well, it'll resonate with people, and people will want that. And people do crave, even in this crazy world of ours, I think people crave the genuine. And that's all I'll say.
Everyone, thank you for joining us with this historic interview with Alexander Lathem. Comment down below if you have any other questions, and we'll see you in the next one.